You carry a scar you never earned, not on your skin, in your DNA. Take any two humans on Earth from any two continents, and their genes will look remarkably similar. Now take two chimpanzees living in the same forest, only a few miles apart. They can carry more genetic difference between them than exists across our entire species. That should make you wonder. Because humans have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, we've crossed deserts, survived ice ages, crossed oceans, adapted to almost every environment on Earth. And yet, compared with many other species, our genetic diversity is surprisingly low. Scientists can see the fingerprints of population crashes buried inside our DNA, moments when the number of our ancestors may have fallen dramatically. Moments when humanity became smaller than it should have been. And one possibility is especially unsettling. At some point in our deep past, our ancestors may have come dangerously close to disappearing. But that wasn't the only time humanity came close to losing its future. Not even close. To understand how fragile our survival really is, you have to go back. Not centuries, not thousands of years. Almost to the edge of what we can trace at all. Roughly 74,000 years ago, long before cities, before writing, before agriculture, humans lived in small, scattered populations. There were no satellites, no weather forecasts, no emergency broadcasts, no history books warning them about what was coming. Then the sky changed. On the island we now call Sumatra, a volcano called Toba erupted with a force almost impossible to comprehend. It was one of the largest known volcanic eruptions of the last 2 million years. It blasted enormous amounts of ash and sulfur into the atmosphere. The eruption was so massive that it left behind a crater lake more than 60 miles long. And for a moment in Earth's history, the atmosphere itself became part of the disaster. Sunlight was reduced, temperatures may have fallen, ecosystems were disrupted. And for years, scientists have debated just how severe the consequences were for humans. For decades, one hypothesis suggested that the eruption triggered a catastrophic population crash. Perhaps humanity was reduced to only thousands of people. If the most extreme versions of that idea were correct, our species would have come frighteningly close to disappearing. But there is a problem. The evidence is not that simple. Archaeological sites suggest that some human populations continued living through this period with less disruption than the most extreme version of the theory would predict. So scientists still debate exactly how badly Toba affected our ancestors. But the bigger mystery remains. Our DNA does show evidence that ancient human populations went through periods of severe reduction. We don't know every detail of what caused them. We don't know exactly how many people survived, and we certainly don't know what it felt like to be one of them. But imagine it. A species spread across a dangerous world. No idea how many people were left, no idea whether the next generation would exist, and no idea that tens of thousands of years later, descendants would still be carrying the genetic consequences. Maybe we didn't survive because we were stronger. Maybe we survived because enough people happened to be in the right places. And that's an uncomfortable thought. Because nature wasn't finished with us. Fast forward tens of thousands of years. Humanity had grown, cities existed, trade routes stretched across continents, people traveled farther than ever before, and then something invisible climbed aboard the ships. The Black Death. In the 14th century, plague spread across Europe, Asia, and surrounding regions. In the hardest-hit parts of Europe, enormous numbers of people died. Some estimates suggest that around half the population of Europe was eventually lost. Entire villages were abandoned. Fields were left unharvested, markets became silent. Families disappeared within days. And nobody understood why. They didn't know about bacteria, they didn't understand transmission, they didn't know the role of fleas and rodents. So when death arrived again and again, people searched for an explanation. And when people don't understand a threat, fear tends to find someone to blame. Communities turned against outsiders. Rumors spread, violence followed. The disease wasn't just killing people, it was changing society. The survivors inherited a world with fewer workers, fewer families, fewer communities, and a completely different relationship with death. But humanity survived. And eventually, the population recovered. Then, centuries later, another disease arrived. And this one behaved in a way that scientists still find disturbing. In 1918, a strain of influenza began spreading across a planet already torn apart by war. There were no modern vaccines, no antibiotics for secondary bacterial infections, no global surveillance systems, And the virus moved through a world where millions of people were already exhausted, displaced, and living in crowded conditions. The death toll is uncertain. Estimates vary widely, but tens of millions of people certainly died, and some estimates place the total far higher, in only a few years. But here's the detail that still unsettles people. Unlike many seasonal infections, the 1918 pandemic killed enormous numbers of young and otherwise healthy adults. People in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s. Some victims developed devastating inflammation in their lungs. Their immune response could become so intense that the body's own defenses contributed to the damage. The very system designed to protect them could become part of the problem. And once again, humanity survived. Not because the disease was harmless, not because humans were prepared, but because enough people lived, enough communities recovered, enough children were born afterward. The species continued, but now we reach a different kind of danger. Because the next time humanity came close to catastrophe, nature wasn't the only thing involved. This is where everything changed. It was caused by us. October 1962. The Cuban Missile Crisis. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a confrontation involving nuclear weapons. For 13 days, the world watched two superpowers move dangerously close to direct conflict. But one of the most frightening moments happened far away from the public eye. Beneath the ocean. A Soviet submarine had lost communication with Moscow. It was running low on air. American ships were dropping depth charges nearby, trying to force the submarine to surface. The Americans didn't know exactly what was inside, and the people inside the submarine didn't know whether war had already begun. The submarine carried a nuclear torpedo. According to the commonly told account, launching it required agreement from 3 senior officers. 2 were prepared to proceed. One man refused. His name was Vasili Arkhipov. His refusal helped prevent the situation from escalating further. Think about that. The fate of millions, perhaps billions, may have depended on a decision made by a handful of exhausted people inside a submarine. But that wasn't the last time. 21 years later, another Soviet officer faced a different kind of nightmare. A Soviet early warning system detected what appeared to be incoming American missiles. The system indicated that a nuclear attack might be underway. The expected response would have been immediate. The information had to be passed up the chain. But the officer watching the system wasn't convinced. Something didn't make sense. His name was Stanislav Petrov. He chose not to treat the warning as a confirmed attack. He was right. It was a false alarm. A technical error had created the appearance of incoming missiles. 2 men, 2 moments. Neither was a president. Neither was a world leader. Neither was trying to become famous, but both made decisions at moments when the consequences of being wrong could have been enormous. And that tells us something important. Human survival isn't always controlled by the people we think are in control. Sometimes it depends on one person hesitating, one person questioning an alarm, one person saying no. Now look at all 4 events together. The volcano, the plague, the pandemic, the nuclear crisis. They seem completely different, but underneath them is the same uncomfortable pattern. Humanity survives catastrophes through incredibly fragile chains of events. A population happens to survive in one region. A disease fails to spread in another. A community recovers. A warning is questioned. A weapon isn't launched. A decision goes the right way. We like to imagine human survival as inevitable, as if we were always going to make it this far, as if progress simply continues because it always has. But history doesn't guarantee anything. We are not the guaranteed outcome of some grand plan. We're the surviving branch of a tree that could have snapped in countless places, and somehow it didn't. There is a concept in astronomy called the Great Filter. The idea is simple. Maybe intelligent life appears relatively often across the universe. Maybe planets produce life. Maybe some life becomes complex. Maybe eventually some species becomes intelligent enough to build technology. But somewhere along that path, something stops them. A filter, a catastrophe, a failure, a technology they couldn't control, a planet they destroyed, a disease they couldn't survive, a war they couldn't stop, or something we haven't even imagined. The terrifying question is where that filter is. Is it ahead of us or behind us? Maybe humanity already passed through some of the hardest stages, Maybe surviving ancient climate shifts, population crashes, pandemics, wars, and nuclear near misses means we've already crossed several dangerous barriers. Or maybe we haven't. Maybe we're still the same fragile species we've always been. Only now, instead of waiting for nature to threaten us, we've started creating threats ourselves. And that's the part that should really bother you. The next near miss. Every event we've talked about came from something we couldn't fully control: a volcano, a pathogen, a pandemic, a military confrontation. But modern civilization has created something new. We can now build systems capable of causing damage on a global scale, and we don't have to wait for nature. We can make the mistake ourselves. That doesn't mean catastrophe is inevitable. It means the future is not guaranteed. And perhaps that is the most important lesson hidden inside all these stories. The fact that we're still here doesn't prove that humanity is invincible. It proves that we've been lucky enough to survive everything so far. This was never really a story about volcanoes, or plagues, or submarines. It's a story about how thin the line can be between existing and not existing. Most of us walk through ordinary life assuming tomorrow will arrive. We make plans, we go to school, we go to work, we argue about small things, we complain about traffic, we worry about money, we plan what we'll do next year. And underneath all of it is an assumption we almost never question: that there will be a next year. Humanity has made that assumption for hundreds of generations. And so far we've been right. But being right for a long time doesn't make something guaranteed. It just means the coin hasn't landed the other way yet. It wasn't inevitable, it still isn't. Somewhere, right now, a decision is being made. A system is running, a mutation is forming, a warning is being interpreted. A chain of events is beginning that nobody may understand until much later. And none of us will know whether it was just another near miss or the moment the coin finally lands the other way. We didn't inherit this planet because we were meant to be here. We inherited it because, so far, we've gotten lucky enough times in a row to call it history instead of an ending.